Over the last 4 years, I've been closely involved with 2 Microsoft Dynamics implementations, both in UK charities, and I've talked with a few other organisations about their experiences with this product. All of these have had challenges with Dynamics. One, the smallest one, succeeded, but only by doing some unplanned work to fill the gaps and take some of the load off Dynamics. In the worst case, the project overran its schedule and cost by 2.5 times, and that charity eventually abandoned one half of the project at a cost of over £1 million. They did not get a refund. That was £1 million that they could not spend on their important work. The scale of these organisations and their data is relevant. One of the charities I have worked with has 900,000 contacts, the other has 2 million. These result in transaction volumes of 8 million and 80 million respectively. So they're mid-sized organisations. They certainly need computer systems to manage this volume, but they don't have the scale of UK banks and mobile phone companies that have tens of millions of customers and billions of transactions. The problems that these charities have faced mean that there are some serious questions to ask. So let's look at my 10 reasons. When you decide that you want a new business system, such as a customer relationship management or CRM system, or a human resources HR system, you are likely to end up with some bids that suggest Microsoft Dynamics 365, Salesforce, and possibly some others. If your organisation is of the mid-size range I described, these bids are likely to come in between £1.5 and £2.5 million. You need to see some significant benefits to make this worthwhile, and the vendors will suggest that you can easily increase your income and decrease your costs. The bids will cover license fees for software, fees for cloud services, and the customization services performed by the implementation partner. When you take the plunge and start on such a project, you probably have some contingency in your budget. In my experience, this will not be enough. The implementation partner will probably start with a few weeks, maybe only 2 weeks, of discovery. The people who do the jobs impacted by the new system will be amazed that the partner can learn everything they need to know about these jobs in such a short time. After discovery, the implementation begins. They will say it is agile. They use the strange terminology of Microsoft's damaged version of Scrum, but they will not use the important principles that are the foundation of real agile development. When the 2 customization engineers, it's usually just 2, have hacked together some rather ugly input screens, they will start talking about data migration. But before we talk about data migration, we need to talk about the common data model. The common data model is my second reason for not buying Microsoft Dynamics. Please bear with me while I try to explain this, because it has very important implications that we will come to in just a minute. Common data models were discredited some years ago. Have a look at the references at the end of this talk. But Microsoft continues to sell the fantasy. Understanding the data used in an organisation and the ways in which it is used can be quite difficult. Every organisation is different. Can you think of an organisation that does exactly what yours does? Do they refer to their customers, donors, partners, subscribers, members using the same words as you do? The different terminology is significant, but the differences in structure and processes are much more profound. Once you do understand your organisation's data, the data model should be easy, because the model should represent the organisation's data simply and directly. Here is a data model for one of the charities I worked with. The rectangles are things that people in the organisation should recognise. In this case, we have individual contacts and organisations. They have addresses. Many of them make donations, and you can see that there are quite a few other things. The lines between these rectangles link, for example, an address to an organisation. Each link represents a type of relationship that exists in the real world and that you need to record. This model has 49 rectangles, which become tables in the database, and 130 lines between them. These are the relationships. And this model describes everything that needs to be recorded in the database for this charity. When the implementation partner allowed us to see the dynamics data model for this charity, we found that it had 734 tables and 8,435 relationships. This is what 734 tables would look like in a diagram. And if you were to draw 8,435 relationships on this diagram, it would look like candy floss. Such a diagram would not be useful. So how do you understand the database? The implication of this is that the dynamics model is horribly overcomplicated. This makes it take up a lot more space, which you have to pay for. It makes the whole thing slow, which frustrates your users and irritates your customers. And it makes it very difficult for your technical staff who are trying to get useful insights from your data. They will get inconsistent and misleading results, and it is difficult to test the accuracy of the fancy dashboards that present the data to you in Dynamics. So now let's return to data migration, my third reason. The implementation partner will expect you to provide the data from your existing systems to populate the Dataverse. The Dataverse is what Microsoft calls the combination of its database software and the common data model. Providing data in the form required for migration will take a lot of work from your team, but that is not the biggest problem. As a point of comparison, we loaded data into the data model I showed you before, the nice one with 49 tables. We loaded 270 million records from 2 old systems, and we did this every night in just a few hours. We also reconciled what we had loaded with the old systems and ran over 100 data quality checks on it, all before the staff started work each morning. This data, the 270 million records, was all the data that needed to be migrated to the Dataverse. So we expected the Dynamics data migration to run in a few hours overnight. Then we got 2 shocks. Firstly, the data increased in size. It was the same data, but stored much less efficiently. Tables in the Dataverse were between 10.7 and 22.1 times the size of the original data. The total size of the database went from 50 gigabytes to over 500 gigabytes. The second shock was the time it took to load the data. We loaded 270 million records into our database in 6 hours. The implementation partner assured us that they could process about 1.8 million records a day, running 24 hours a day. This meant that the data migration would take 150 days. That's 5 months. Think about how you would work with variable portions of your data in the new system and the old systems over a 5-month period. The advice from the implementation partner was to store only the most recent data in the Dataverse. Microsoft advertises Dynamics as being a scalable system. It is not. The data migration experience also highlighted the cost of operation, so let's consider that now. As well as license fees and usage fees, Microsoft charges for disk space used. The charity was quoted £1.50 per gigabyte per month for files, Word documents, Excel spreadsheets, images and so on. £1.50 per gigabyte per month for log files, and £21.20 per gigabyte per month for disk space in the Dataverse. This was going to cost over £100,000 per year just for disk space for the Dataverse. We were storing all of this data in another database system, which actually was running on a Microsoft Azure cloud, for £1,000 a year. That is 1/100th of the cost. And this cheaper system was reliable, heavily used, and it performed well. People where I live would say, Microsoft, they're having a laugh. But it was not funny for the charity. This was an entirely unexpected and unjustifiable level of cost. The Microsoft Dynamics promotional video is a slick, virtual reality-inspired, fantastical work in which I can find no relation to actual reality. From the video, you might expect the user interface to look like this, like this, like this, or like this. What you actually get is this. The blue blobs I've put there because this is real data in a real system and I need to protect the privacy of the people who are recorded here. You can see some problems with this user interface. The headings are abbreviated and the data is abbreviated as well. In the actual system you can enlarge each column, but that's pretty tedious, and anyway you have to scroll sideways for miles to see the whole record. You might like to use this as a quiz to identify all the user interface crimes that are illustrated on this one screen. Here's a clue. Count the menus. But for now, let's just look at the column headings. The first column says CO ... If we move along to the right-hand side, it says main add ... main add ... main add ... main ... The first column is the supporter's account number. It's 10 digits long and you can see the first 5, so that's not very helpful. These 5 characters are the same in every row that we can see here because the last few digits are what makes the difference in this particular set of records. Other things get abbreviated, bits of the address, even the town, and yet there's loads of white space on the screen, so it's very wasteful. And what do you think all those menus are for? The common data model, as well as having too many of everything, has many other features that make it unnecessarily complicated. For a start, there are 22 columns which are in every one of 80% of the tables. If you have ever designed a database, you would find that quite surprising. Also, the naming of Dataverse objects is unnecessarily obscure. State code name, status code, and status code name are in 4 of the 22 common columns. State code is a number, and state code name is the value that matches that number. Very often, state code name and status code name take the values active and inactive. Why not have one column called active that takes values yes and no? Instead, these column names stand for many different things in the different tables. Names in the Dataverse generally have all the words stuck together, as you can see here. Just putting underscores between the words simplifies understanding and saves time and mistakes. The last entry suggests that we are involved in recruiting airport security guards. Not really. Of course, it actually means assessment of risk, but this does illustrate the loss of information if you don't separate the words. The so-called advanced find feature of Dynamics is an attempt to enable users to specify compound conditions for selecting data using diagrams. It is neither as intuitive nor anywhere near as powerful as the standard language for accessing databases, SQL. SQL is widely used and understood by almost every database technician. Advanced Find will generate fetch.xml, which Microsoft supplies as an alternative to SQL. The fetch.xml on the left is equivalent to the SQL on the right. As you can see, the fetch.xml is more complex and involves a lot more typing compared with the SQL. Why would you invent such a non-standard, functionally lacking, ugly, useless thing as fetch.xml when there is a much better solution already? Most databases use integers as identifiers, but the Dataverse uses GUIDs. Here are some GUIDs and some integers. A GUID takes up 16 bytes in the Dataverse and 36 characters in its human readable form. They are not easy to read or transcribe. Integers, as shown here, take up 4 bytes. You use only as many digits as you need. So these are several examples of Microsoft introducing bits of unnecessary complexity. There are many other such features in Dynamics. When you add them all together, you get a horribly complex system that slows you down at every stage, making you more likely to make mistakes and increasing your costs. The Microsoft promotional video for Dynamics finishes with this shot, captioned, "No limits." As we have seen, the Dataverse cannot even store all the data that a smallish charity was previously storing in another standard SQL database. There may not be fixed limits on the Dataverse size, but in practice every other SQL database can leave it standing. Despite the bold statement from the promotional video, Microsoft imposes several other limits and describes them openly in a bossy way in its documentation. Entitlement limits represent the number of requests users are entitled to make each day. The allocated limit depends on the type of license assigned to each user. Now, if you've paid over £1 million for a computer system, do you expect to be told that you've run out, that you've used your quota for the day? Service protection limits ensure consistent availability and performance for everyone. We, that's Microsoft, apply some limits to how APIs are used with Dataverse. What exactly are they suggesting here? Functionality limits. Dataverse has less functionality than Microsoft SQL Server. It is essentially Microsoft SQL Server, but Microsoft has switched off a lot of its functionality. There's a long list on their website of not supported features. It is astonishing how many things they've switched off from what was a good, solid relational database system. SQL query limits. As we've seen, SQL is the language that developers use to communicate with the database. Microsoft limits you to 80 megabytes of results. 80 megabytes isn't very much, is it? Your phone probably has 16, 32, 64 gigabytes of data storage on it. There are many legitimate reasons why you might need to extract more than 80 megabytes of data from your database, but Microsoft says you must buy other products to do that. Data transfer limits. If you run Dynamics, then everything is in the Dynamics world and you can move things around within your Microsoft cloud to their different products. But if you want to move data out of the Microsoft environment, they charge you for moving that data. It's your data. You've already paid them to store your data, and now they want to make you pay to transfer it as well. Microsoft calls this bandwidth pricing. The references at the end of this talk show where you can find these limitations on Microsoft's own website. Microsoft's emphasis is on selling Dynamics licenses and reaping the ongoing usage charges, which we have seen to be extortionate. They are selling to senior managers, and Microsoft knows what those managers want. So Microsoft promises what they want. Dynamics can produce fancy dashboards, but Microsoft has no interest in ensuring that they are correct. Microsoft suggests that Dynamics allows its customers to cut out the technical staff. What happens is that everyone is getting data from the dynamic system and then using office tools to munge it into something that looks plausible. The solid engineering skills that ensure data quality have been swept aside. Customers give money to Microsoft, far more than they would have given to their own skilled staff, so that they can enter the fantasy bubble that is kept inflated by the big vendors and their friends, the big research companies. It is very cosy and it is destroying good organizations, private, public and charitable. The bad design of the Dataverse, which runs counter to every good data management practice, results in much more work being needed to deliver results with known levels of accuracy. The emphasis on appearance to high-level managers is causing huge inefficiency in those organizations that actually survive a Dynamics implementation. The Dynamics Dataverse is orders of magnitude less efficient than well-established relational databases. The user interface causes inefficiencies which are difficult to measure, but which you can observe easily by watching a user struggle with it. The pretense of low code, no code is manifested in the hoops that data engineers have to jump through to access the data in the Dataverse and try to use professional data management techniques to ensure accuracy, or at least to quantify the bounds of the inaccuracy. The inefficiency is soul-destroying for people who are trying to do a good job, and like the other issues I have described, it costs you money. Microsoft delivers, as part of the Dataverse, a web resources table, which contains, amongst other things, labels in multiple languages. This table, as delivered, is 1.5 gigabytes, so it costs you £30 a month to store it. In the systems I have worked on, it will never be used. Dynamics also includes, alongside every copy of a name, a YOMI name. The YOMI name is intended to give a phonetic spelling of a name that would appear in a language that uses a writing system, such as Kanji or Arabic, that is different from the host system, such as UK or US English. In the systems I have worked on, the YOMI name is an exact copy of the local name, so it wastes space. Bearing in mind the aggressive selling of Dynamics in the UK, I expected UK English naming and spelling of things like town instead of city and postcode instead of zip. I also expected address lookup as provided by almost every website that needs my address. I type in my postcode or some other part of my address and the system presents me with a short list of possible addresses and I select mine. Microsoft doesn't even attempt to do this. The date formats do not include the one I want either. Of particular importance to UK charities are direct debits and gift aid. Microsoft Dynamics does not supply processing for these. I asked a very experienced senior consultant in this area, how many Dynamics projects succeed? Without any hesitation he said, oh, less than half of them. That's not a very promising risk profile. Those that have struggled through and got something they can work around have lost a lot of time and money and given their donors, clients, customers a poorer service during and following the implementation. The risk of losing the people they rely on for their income is going to be higher because of the tribulations of the Dynamics implementation. Many people still believe that big companies offer lower risk. This is supported by the likes of Gartner and Forrester, both of which assess products on their marketing materials and not on their actual performance. Add to that the understandable reluctance of organizations to publicize their failures, and the people who are making money from these projects, whether they succeed or fail, and the risk of believing the cacophony of hype is very high indeed. From my experience, a trusted in-house team or a small software house that can demonstrate success with a string of clients is a much better bet. And yet, most senior managers are afraid to take the lower risk, lower cost options. Instead, they hand over millions of pounds to Microsoft, often with disastrous effects on the organisation they are managing. The things that I have shared with you here have caused a great deal of pain to the people who work to these charities, to their donors and to their beneficiaries, whose difficulties could not be alleviated to the extent that large sums of the money had gone to Microsoft and its partners. The promise of increased income did not happen either. If you are thinking of buying Microsoft Dynamics 365, please think again. Too many good organisations have been hurt by this software. Please don't be the next one.